A very warm good evening to all the August audience and our guests who are here with us today. It's a beautiful Sunday and also marks the Oral Cancer Awareness Month, where I Can Care along with Sterling Cancer Hospital Foundation for Head and Neck Oncology is organizing the Oral Cancer E-Conclave for the entire month. We are going to have 4 Sundays, which are full of wonderful scientific sessions for the audience and for with great academic content as well as great practical learning from prolific oncosurgeons who are here with us today on this event and will address us, and from whom we will have a wonderful opportunity to learn a lot of things. I thank all the partnering organizations and their respective representatives who are here with us today.
It's my pleasure to have Dr. Ricky Agarwal, who is a consultant histopathologist at the Max Super Specialty Hospital, Saket, New Delhi. So over to you, Dr. Ricky Agarwal.
Hi, good afternoon, all of you. I welcome you all for joining in today's meeting, and thank you, organizers. I'm Dr. Riti, and the roadmap for my today's talk will be in 2 parts. In first part, I'll be discussing, shortly about these histopathological dilemmas and clues for diagnosis in oral lesions. And in the second part, I'll be discussing a little about HPV testing. So as already the epidemiology and the data has been discussed by Dr. Nishit, so I would move directly to the dilemmas that we as per histopathologists face. So first dilemma, the most common, is the pseudoepitheliomatous hyperplasia, in which we usually face whether it's malignant or not. What is pseudoepitheliomatous hyperplasia? It's actually a very florid reactive epithelial proliferation seen in response to a variety of conditions, which includes infection, neoplasia, inflammation, and trauma. I guess the video is not clear. And when we see it on the biopsy, it is hyperkeratotic, irregular, and infiltrative like tongues of mature squamous epithelium. The slides are stuck. Hello.
Dr. Riti, you have actually not done the screen share. You have done the reading part. So if you just do the screen share, no?
It's showing your screen sharing, sir.
If you do the full slide, then it will not get stuck. You just undo that and then do the screen slide. Full screen.
No, it's full screen only. It's full screen only. But I guess just
maybe the internet connection had some issues.
Yeah.
I've changed my position. That is why. So okay, sorry for the interruption. So florid pseudoepitheliomatous hyperplasia, as I've already discussed, it's seen in response to a variety of conditions. And what we see on microscopy is hyperkeratotic, irregular, and infiltrative tongues of mature squamous epithelium. And what is important here is that there should not be any atypia, dysplasia, dyskeratosis, and atypical mitotic figures. So this is a photograph where we can see this is the hyperplastic and hyperkeratotic stratified squamous epithelium, and this irregular, these sharp edges which are coming out into the dermis. This is what pseudoepitheliomatous hyperplasia looks like. And as compared to true dysplasia, this is a mild dysplasia. Then we move on to full thickness dysplasia. In dysplasia, there will be nuclear atypia, loss of polarity, dyskeratosis, and a number of mitotic activity. So this is the photograph of the dyskeratosis, where you can see these squamoid cells showing dyskeratosis, and this is a photograph of the atypical mitotic figures. This is a tripolar mitosis. So when we see these features, these help us to reach to a diagnosis that this is the true dysplastic lesion, and it's not just mild atypia or a pseudoepitheliomatous hyperplasia, which can be easily confused with the true malignancy. Okay, so these were the atypical mitosis. So the second dilemma that is very commonly discussed is verrucous hyperplasia versus verrucous carcinoma. In verrucous hyperplasia, again, the epithelium is hyperplastic, hyperkeratotic, exophytic, and with the papillary fronds. This is a photograph. This is markedly, you can see, hyperkeratotic. And this is acanthotic as the thickness has increased. And these are the papillary fronds, the church spires, what we call. And this at the bottom, these are the retics, which are broad. But still, they are not so pushing. When we see in verrucous carcinoma, they are quite pushy. But the important difference that helps us to differentiate between hyperplasia and carcinoma is the relationship of the epithelium with respect to the adjacent epithelium. This is the adjacent epithelium. Again here, these are the broad retipecs. With respect to the adjacent epithelium, they are still in line with the same. They are at the same level as that of the adjoining normal epithelium. And whereas in verrucous carcinoma, it's a cauliflower-like surface. You can see how hyperkeratotic, acanthotic these have become. And the retipecs are so blunt, club-shaped, and very broad and pushing deep into the dermis. And definitely they are, far more beyond than the adjacent normal epithelium. And definitely one thing is more important is that there should not be any cytological atypia. If you start seeing cytological atypia, then you have to really look for the more tissue, because then this could be a very frank squamous cell carcinoma also. So in the biopsy, there should not be any atypia. My cursor. So this is not dysplastic. There is no nuclear dyspolarity, no loss of polarity, no nuclear hyperchromasia. There is no atypical mitotic activity. So if in this picture, I can tell you that this is a normal epithelium. As one moves to hyperplasia, definitely the hyperplasia has started. This is the exophytic frons, but still more or less it is in line with the normal epithelium. All the frons are at the same height and they're not so pushing and broad and bulbous. Whereas in verrucous carcinoma, these papillary frons are going far more beyond than the adjacent normal epithelium, and deep down into the dermis also, they are very broad and pushy. These are the photographs. This is a normal epithelium, and this is the hyperkeratotic epithelium with these broad fronts, and they are far much more deeper into the tissue, into the dermis, as compared to the adjacent normal epithelium. So this is the main point that really helps us to know about verrucous hyperplasia and carcinoma. That is why it's very important in these lesions that the adjacent normal epithelium, the junction has to be there in the biopsy. Then it really helps you to identify. Otherwise, sometimes, as a pathologist, we report it as a squamoproliferative lesion, or if suppose the biopsy has been just taken from the superficial top and the biopsy is flat, then we really can't make out anything, because neither can we see the depth, nor we can see the adjacent epithelium. And when the lesion is quite, exuberant, then these are the epithelial frons where it's, forming amalgamate, and all the sections are like this. These are, just the pictures showing you the verrucous carcinoma. Now, a little about HPV testing. I won't go into the details much, as we all know that oropharyngeal carcinoma is about 40 to 60%. They are linked to HPV. And the most common site and the site for the predilection are tonsils and base of the tongue, as they are, lymphoid-rich sites. And the two types of HPV infections, low risk and high risk. Low risk is 6 and 11, and high risk is 16 and 18. And HPV 16 is the main genotype that is responsible for head and neck cancers. And when we come to HPV positive cancers, the sites of predilection being tonsil and the base of the tongue, since they are very easy for the lymphoid access, so that is why these patients present at an advanced end stage. Nodal metastasis is usually seen. And when we come to the genetics, the P16 mutation happens in HPV positive, which we are able to assess through P16 IHC. That is the first surrogate marker that we like to put, because P16 is positive for HPV positive, whereas in HPV negative, P53 is there. It's a mutated and wild type. In wild type, it is heterogeneous positivity is seen, which is weak or patchy heterogeneous. And when we call P53 mutated, it can be mutated in two forms, which we see on IHC in our IHC slides. Either it could be diffusely positive, homogeneous positive, or it can be dead negative. So what is important is that dead negative should not be ignored. When it is completely negative, then also it is mutated. So that is why we prefer to write P53 wild type and mutated type rather than positive and negative, because negative in dead negative also is mutated. And for the testing, the P16 is the primarily surrogate marker that we do for by IHC. The other tests that can be done are PCR-based, DNA-ish, and latest is NGS, which helps us to characterize or identify the complete molecular structure. But I think more needs to be done in NGS, because once we identify the entire profile only, then I guess the targeted therapies and vaccines can be made out. So this is a PCR, RT-PCR can be there, and PCR-based assays actually have lower specificity, and P16 has higher sensitivity. That is why the first marker that we try to put is P16. And DNA-ish is also there. Since it is helpful to detect integrated viral DNA, it is a higher specificity and a lower sensitivity. So this is one of the algorithm that I put, that HPV-6 markers, P16 is the first marker. And as we move downwards towards NGS, we are able to actually target the E6, E7, messenger RNAs, the microRNAs, and all the structures. So this is just to conclude, this is a slide where the P16 IHC, when it is positive, it looks like this. And HPV DNAH, these are the blue, purplish dots. And in NGS, this E6, E7 messenger RNA. So it just looks more like IHC. So to conclude my talk, I would like to mention one more thing, that whenever these histological dilemmas and all these are considered, the important thing is to have a proper clinico-pathological correlation. In these biopsies, even when we are not able to see the junction, if we call up our clinicians and we ask what is the site, what is the size of the lesion, and they are really, as I can see, Dr. Rohit Nair sir is there, Dr. Akshat is there, all these clinicians of ours who are of always great help, they actually tell us what was the size of the lesion, where the incisional biopsy has been done, what were their limitations. So that also gives us a clue that yes, they are on the right place. They need to work more on that. So what we do is, in the difficult cases, we try to put cytokeratin also to see the single cell infiltration. That probably we are missing onto something. We go for deep cuts. We reorient the biopsy. Sometimes we melt our block, we reorient it, re-embed it, and go for deeper cuts so as to have a better picture. So, and that's all, I guess. That's all. Thank you so much. Thank you for the.
Thank you, Dr. Riti. In fact, you are the one who gives us the green signal, so the role of the clinicians really actually then start. So thank you for that lucid talk.